lately, the more I continue to communicate with people, in general, I had a big, a blank period when I wasn't communicating with people involved in esotericism. Well, let's take, for example, people who see, hear, and feel. And I actually started again just in the last couple of months since I came to religion, came to God, and I started to have a key question. Why is all this necessary if there is God and you can just reach out to him? I mean, not with helpers like crystals, powders, stones, temples, or any ritual stuff. If God is above all this, then why do we need all these intermediaries? So, not with helpers like crystals, powders, stones, temples, or any ritual stuff. And if God is above all this, then why do we need all these intermediaries, let's say? Intermediaries. So let's say...
That's absolutely wonderful. It's a really great question because I completely share it with you. Because again, yes, what is the higher self? Well, the higher self, in essence, is you are God. Well, I mean, it's our soul, but it's directly connected to God. That's it. So for me, communicating with the higher self is communicating with God, but just more so. It's like a more structured, let's say, practice. In a certain practice, because I can feel it better to God, clearly knowing that this is truly a touch to some high, pure, wise energies. And most importantly, I can control my mind. I mean, I can be clear. Control my mind so I can be clear to understand that this doesn't come from my mind, that it comes from some deeper layers, and to believe that I am truly touching all of this. Well, then I completely agree with you. I don't use any intermediaries. Well, sometimes just out of curiosity, especially back then, I was a bit interested in palmistry, even though that's not really an intermediary either, since it's your own hand. All sorts of cards, these crystals and so on and so forth. But mostly I don't use anything. It's just a direct connection to the higher self, and through it, to God. Well, in general,
not that it's not contradictory, but my thought right away. We were talking, I asked you questions, and you said it needs to be direct. So when I asked the question, what is the divine plan? You said this, I need to connect directly with God and talk to him. It's like
Look, when you talk about speaking to God, are you like addressing him? Yes. Are you addressing him either through some religious ritual or are you just speaking to him? And that's it. But if I want to specifically answer the question of what God thinks, I need to not just address him, but to hear his response, and ideally, I should hear it, while becoming him, so that the answer isn't distorted by my mind. This is what I wanted to do. And if you just address God and try to catch some kind of answer, that's not the question. It's not that difficult. There, I specifically wanted to become God. That's a bit different. Heresy has emerged, if we're talking about it, within the framework of Islam or Christianity, but specifically within the practice. There was a parable about the priests of ancient times who had a strong practice, the most powerful practice that they wanted to master, but they just couldn't manage it. This is practice, a direct dialogue with God. So, it's like you connect with God and practically become God, having a conversation with him and clearly hearing his answers. It's like he's right there in the room. About this in general, it was written in various books. And it really is very difficult. It's a very complex practice. One thing is just to kind of address him. Yes, you can address him, but actually reaching him in practice, feeling him, that power, that's a slightly different topic.
Also, based on probably this topic, there's a question I've heard multiple times, maybe because I'm in Islam, but perhaps it's true that not only Muslims say this. There's, in general, some information I've heard that in the end, and this will happen very soon, only one religion will remain, and that is Islam. Is that true? Will there be any more religions? Or will everything still come together into one religion, whether it's Islam or just some completely different faith?
Look. We studied this topic. I actually have a whole episode on this topic on my main channel. You know what I saw? Again, with all due respect to Islam, I respect all religions as I've seen Christians, Muslims, Buddhists who achieved higher self. A lot of guys, representatives of Christianity, Islam, and Buddhism, who have truly reached the higher self. That's in the terminology of esotericism. They are very spiritual people. They are really very spiritual from the word spirit. They really have spirit. It shines from them and they truly live by it. Still, When I look into the future of religions, I see that over time, it's on the horizon. Maybe in 200 years, 300 years, religions will gradually fade away. Everything is starting to fade away. That's right. In their modern form, they all start to fade away a bit. They begin to drift into the past. And over time, as I've seen it, this is purely my own vision. Yes, and as they say, I don't claim anything here. They start to become, like some kind of history, a history. And over time, as I saw it again, this is exclusively my own vision. Yes, and as they say, I don't claim anything here. They start to become, like some kind of history, a history of wise, deep, sacred thoughts and feelings in consciousness of wise, deep, sacred thoughts and feelings in the consciousness of humanity's past. Well, after some time of humanity's past, after some time, I mean, it really fades away. Well, like into history. So we were really sitting there. The show lasted about an hour, I think, and I was really diving deep into it. There wasn't a feeling that we would stay forever. Well, with the religions that exist now, the further we go, the more people will feel the energies, feel the same God. They won't need rituals anymore to do all of this. To feel the energies, to feel the same God. They won't need rituals anymore to do all of this. So that doesn't mean that the society of the future, I don't know, will be Satanists, God forbid, or atheists, or something else. So no, they will actually be quite spiritual, but more on a level of, like, from my own practice. So it's kind of like, esotericism in its purest form, without all this glitter, without all this foam that we've already discussed in this series. This foam will recede and slowly all the good things. What will esotericism bring to this world? It will remain and will develop to continue here. Maybe not in the form of a direct religion, but rather in the form of some kind of knowledge. It reminds me of something in the past. People would go to the forest and communicate with the trees. Well, let's say, back in the times of paganism, people would communicate with trees, somehow feel them, and so on a level of some kind of religious ritualism to some extent, right? And nowadays, many people go to the forest and also hug trees, communicate with them. I don't know, something like that, yeah, but it's not there anymore. It's that very ritualistic subtext, but there is just love to nature. There are, maybe some esoteric elements, but there's less ritualism. I see the process, it's exactly in this direction, moving towards less and less ritualism, fewer ceremonies, and more natural things. Some things that even over time won't be called practices or anything like that. It will just be, natural, the state of humanity. But again, this is on the horizon of 300, 400 years. In other words, they no longer need it. There will be a religion to communicate with God. That's what I wanted to say.
Based on this, we can say that in the future, people will be more spiritual, more pure and more intimate to God. Yes. That's
a fact. Solid 1000.
So basically, all these fears may be imposed, maybe just the state we're in right now, about the fact that, there's that phrase, Lord, where are we heading? Or stop the planet, I want to get off. It's a very popular phrase. Yes, all of this. It's not that these fears are unfounded, but you can just get rid of them. And we are actually moving towards the light and moving towards God.
Yes, of course. Well, look, again, proving this is extremely simple. We can prove it from two positions. The first position is, for example, if we appeal to the topic of practices. So, as I've said many times before, all practices are easier today. Well, easier. For those of you watching me right now, most of you have been engaged in various spiritual practices for many years. Well, easier. So, those of you watching me right now, most of you have been engaged in various spiritual practices for many years. Most likely you can see it, especially with the youth who are getting into this topic. So, what was there, conditionally speaking, in the last century and what it is now? Well, it's really easier now in the last century, and what it is now? Well, it's really easier now. But we can analyze it from the perspective of the mind, not just from the perspective of practices, purely from logic. Again, let's take the Middle Ages. Not the romanticized Middle Ages, but the actual Middle Ages purely. The actual Middle Ages take any descriptions from historians. I actually took them. There are a bunch of historians who write historical books. Yes, if we just take historians, the Wei Cho, relying on historical archives, on what is recorded in history books, what was considered the norm back then. today will seem not just like darkness and pornography. It will seem completely beyond good and evil. Back then, that was the norm. Here's the usual comparison. How many years have passed for us? Near half a millennium, right? So, roughly speaking, about 400, 500 years. And what, excuse me, I mean, yes, actually, if we dig a little deeper, here I am. Literally yesterday I was reading. I don't know how much of this I can share on YouTube. I will soften it. Descriptions of the guys from these Austronesian tribes. So these are the Fiji Islands. These are the islands. So these are the Solomon Islands, Samoa, the Samoans, Hawaii. Further north, we're not taking Hawaii. It's specifically this one. The oceanic region around Australia. So they're also in 1836, something like that, around those years. At the beginning of the 19th century in Russia, Pushkin was already booming. He was booming. He wrote a bunch of all his most famous novels. So yes, the cannibalism was really thriving, just really thriving and flourishing. And they had three types of cannibalism. They had cannibalism. So this is ritualistic. I mean, it's to eat and take energy from another person. There was cannibalism. So this is punitive when someone doesn't like you and you eat them. And there was also food-related cannibalism, which was more about wanting to eat, and you just went and ate someone. What's most interesting is the chiefs of the tribes, they were very actively eating their fellow tribesmen. And one chief, I think it was written that in his lifetime, he would place a stone for each person he ate. And so he accumulated these stones by the thousands. That is, approximately, he ate 1,000 people in his lifetime. Those were the times. Pushkin, again, yeah, we have Pushkin, and they ate 1,000 people. So that's not the main thing. The main thing is that the people he ate in this tribe were grateful to him for it. Well, I mean, the tribe left this for the chiefs. They are very wise. They do everything right there. There was a period of prosperity and so on. And there were even stories when people would come and they would tear off a part of the body and eat it. I'm not going to say what parts they were. With them, I mean this very chief, you kind of gave a part of your body as a gift to him. He ate him. So this person lived as a disabled person for the rest of his life. But he was happy. He wasn't against it. He had not the slightest doubt at all. In general, whatever the chief did, he didn't think it was wrong. He was not against it. He did not have the slightest doubt. In general, what the chief did there was something wrong. You understand, right? 200 years ago, yes, even less, about 180 years ago. And up until the beginning of the 20th century, this all remained on a number of islands. We're taking this in the context of those islands. Okay, yes, but again, I mean, today it's an absolutely different civilization. So it's been about 150, 200 years, and in Fiji, we have Australians coming in by the tons. This is one of those world resorts, and maybe someone somewhere, of course, remembers something about their roots. Yes, but as of today, well, today, for most Fijians, the idea of eating a person seems absolutely immoral. As a society, compared to what it was 200 years ago, 300 years ago, 400 years ago, 500 years ago, we've become much more ethical. It still seems absolutely immoral. As a society, compared to what it was 200 years ago, 300 years ago, 400 years ago, 500 years ago, we've become much more ethical already. This process is already visible. We've become much more moral. As I often say, if you were to approach a person in the Middle Ages, to a medieval peasant, and start pouring all these modern ideas about the inner child into him, respect yourself, reveal yourself, allow yourself to be expressed in the world, allow yourself to feel free, but he, again, will either run away or he will simply hit you over the head with this poker. Well, or with a shovel, right? So, over the past 300, 400 years, we've become more ethical as a society. In any case, we've become more ethical. I mean, I don't know who you have to be to deny this fact. And in terms of vibrations, let's move to the esoteric level. In terms of vibrations, we've also risen. Because any energy that is more ethical, more humane, more moral, it is still higher in vibrations than the energy of anger, aggression, and the desire to eat your neighbor based on some of your their passions? Well, yes, there are also some emissions today. Of course, in some I don't know. In some clans, orders, or special organizations, there is. It's all there. But it's not a mass energy. It's still not mass. And what was once, according to notes, including those of historians, perceived as an absolute norm, especially on a mass scale, today is considered completely wild, deviant behavior. And guys, like that need to be treated, yes, and so on. By the way, let's talk about the death penalty. In the past, the death penalty, here you go, they brought you out to the square, so everyone will come and start jeering at you, and they'll even throw stones at you. Yes, and so every year, the number of countries that impose a moratorium on the death penalty is increasing. And even in those strict republics that hold very traditional views, they're also introducing it in strict countries. They're doing it more and more. And more often, moratoriums, bans on that, because it's already a different time, it's still unethical, immoral. So, yes, we are moving in that direction. Plus, that's absolutely true. And in another 400, 500 years, society will become even more ethical, even more moral than it is now. That's a fact, absolutely. This is from a higher perspective. You can see it from the perspective of cultural studies, sociology, and even from the standpoint of economics and politics. From any position?
Dear friends, I invite you all to my course with a personal vision, Return to the True Self. This course has been around for over 12 years. And recently we launched it in English with my complete personal vision in 6 modules, working with blocks, working with egregores, working with the ego, contacting the higher self. Answers to simple questions, answers to more complex questions, and then there's what we call the Great Journey. It's contact with space, contact with the planet, contact with God, contact with anything, at your request, through the higher self. Health, finances, relationships, purpose, past life. The course is available at any time. You can sign up for it using the link below this video. Come on over, I'll be waiting for you.